Hi there. I want to take a quick minute to talk to you about your tendonitis pain, or if you want to be proper with terminology, tendinosis. So really quick, just a general idea, whether it's tendonitis in your elbow, golfers, tennis, it could be patella tendonitis like jumper's knee, Achilles tendon pain, and believe it or not, even plantar fasciitis falls underneath the same kind of category of what causes this injury and what you could do to address it. All in all, basically what's happening here is that the tendon or the fascia, the connective tissue, isn't strong enough to withstand the shock loads that you're putting through it. So what do I mean? So if I were to jump up and jump down, when I land, all of a sudden there's this really heavy shock load. I might be 220 pounds, but there's a whole lot more force going through my foot when I land from jumping rather than when I'm just standing static. And the same thing if you play tennis, you might be swinging a racket that only weighs a certain number of ounces and hitting a ball that only weighs a few ounces. But when that ball's flying 70, 80 miles an hour and you're swinging as hard as you can, the shock loads going through your tendon could be hundreds of pounds of force. So it's that immediate, heavy load that hits the tendon or the fascia that the tissues just aren't strong enough to withstand, and you start getting these micro tears and damage of the tissue. And if it's something that you do over and over repetitively, the tissue continues to get damaged, it doesn't heal properly, and some of the healing that does occur ends up being these layers of scar tissue, which can strengthen it, but at the same time, it strengthens the tissue by thickening up in a way that kind of destroys some of its elastic properties. So if the issue is that you're taking on these shock loads, you want it to be strong, but you also want it to be a little springy so it doesn't tear. And as you build up the scar tissue, it just gets stiffer and stiffer and stiffer, which again opens you up to more and more injury. So a lot of people, they'll go get shots, they'll take time off, and there's a lot of different ways you can go about healing those tissues. But quite often, and I get a lot of people commenting on my blogs as well as on my YouTube channels about this, as soon as they go back to the sport and they think that they're healed, taking 6 weeks or 6 months off, and they start going back to the same intensity of play, the injuries come back and they're very dismayed because they've done everything they could to heal, but what they never did is they never did the proper protocol to actually strengthen those tissues to be able to withstand the forces that they're demanding from them. And the safest way to go about this, and this isn't me just making it up, this is from tons of research out there in the medical journals, is eccentric exercise. So eccentric is basically, if I were to do a contraction, this is concentric. I'm shortening the muscle tissue in the bicep. But now, as I'm under tension and I'm lengthening it, that's the eccentric contraction. And the reason why this is really safe, whether it's for a bicep tendonitis or the forearm or any of these joints, is because you're getting into the contracted position and then you're slowly and safely putting increasing the load and then lengthening the tissues. So what you're avoiding is the shock load, but you're also at the same time actually putting enough force through the collagen fibers, and the way all the matrix of the connective tissue is then getting enough of a stimuli from that load to tell it that it needs to start healing and strengthening. And it should actually be a little uncomfortable. It should be a little bit irritating of those tissues, but again, at the same time, it shouldn't feel worse the next day. It might hurt a little bit in that moment, but it's enough of a stimuli to get it start healing. The fibers start realigning, whereas when you've got scar tissue, they're kind of crossed all over the place, so you don't have a very good elasticity that way. But the stress, all that signals from the eccentric exercise with load starts getting the fibers to start realign. So they're stronger, they're actually thinner, but structurally they're stronger, and they start regaining some of their elastic properties, so they're more able to withstand future injuries.